Welcome back. The Attorney-General Robert McClelland has spoken of the need for the West to focus on the root causes of terrorism. He was addressing a conference in Sydney today about the decade since the September 11 attacks.
Like our allies in the United States and the United Kingdom, the Australian government recognises that addressing the causes of radicalisation leading to violent extremism must, for these reasons, be a priority.
Well, Lynn Vavreck is Associate Professor in Political Science at the University of Southern California. She's in Australia for the summit on the decade since September 11, hosted by the United States Centre. Professor Vavreck is the co-author of a survey on American and Australian attitudes towards global security and the war on terror, and she joins us now here in the Drum Studio. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Lynn, you talked to 2,000 people, more or less, here in Australia, about 900 in the USA. The top line seems to be that we're not that much worried about terrorism anymore.
I think that's right. In both countries, across all political parties, people told us that the most important problem facing their nation was the economy, hands down, followed closely by some domestic policy issues, and then trailing pretty far behind terrorism and the wars.
Why?
I think that the way we think about this is, first thing, for sure if there were an attack or there were an incident, we would see this number rise. So public opinion does respond to what's happening in the world around us. And now I think people have come to accept the war on terror as a feature of their environment. That's the big takeaway, that it's something we're going to have to live with.
Well, the idea that we're safe until we're not probably isn't that shocking, but what was a bit more surprising about your survey was your findings about the 9/11 attacks, and did the US provoke the attacks? What did you find?
Yes, very interesting. We wanted to get a sense of whether people picked up on the perception that these attacks were in any way provoked by U.S. policy. And in fact, in Australia, roughly a third of the respondents told us that in some way these attacks were a response to U.S. policy. In the United States, the number was smaller, about a quarter. On the flip side, about a third of the people said no, they didn't think it was either. But there was this palpable sense that this was not a random attack.
It's not really the sort of PC orthodox line to say that, though, is it?
It's a little bit of a difficult opinion, I think, to tell someone when they ask you. Now, bear in mind, I think here we can say the survey respondents were not placing blame, and they certainly weren't saying that the United States deserved what it's got. It was nothing like that, but just sort of a very real assessment of the complicated global environment that we live in and the United States security concerns and how they go about executing those.
Well, almost a consequence of one superpower behaving like a superpower. These are the consequences.
Yeah, you're going to make enemies, and this is Australians saying they made their enemies mad, and their enemies acted.
All right. Interestingly, on closer results, you also asked about whether or not confronting terrorism makes us safer.
Yes.
Very briefly before we talk to the rest of the panel, what did you find?
Well, again, this is roughly half of people in Australia thought that Australia should be a little more isolationist, and if we leave people alone, they'll leave us alone. A little bit different result in the United States. People may be embracing a little bit of the Obama line on this, that we need to reach out and we need to cultivate these alliances. But really both results very close to the 50-50 mark.
Okay, Fran Kelly, are we seeing some degree of terror fatigue here?
Well, I was just going to ask Lynn whether there was any sense that it was simply because it's 10 years since September 11, or less time since Bali, of course, the Bali bombings here in Australia, which brought it home to us, or that is there a sense that the authorities have a little more control now? There is better security at the airports, there is better security in customs, is there a trust in the anti-terrorism legislation and security measures we've brought in?
It's a great question, and we asked people, do you think you've just been lucky, or has your government actually done things? And again, you know, a third of the people think they've been lucky, a third really attribute it to government. But my read on all the data is just people think the war is never going to end. A vast majority of people say it's with us for a long time. They don't think we're winning or losing. It's not really worth the costs. So I think, as I said earlier, we've just reached a new normal, and this is it.
So if it's not really worth the cost, sorry, just briefly, does that mean they'd rather us stop?
I don't. We actually did not ask people should we stop all of these activities. So I think that it's more of just an ambivalence about and the uncertainty. And again, it would all change if something happened tomorrow.
Peter Lewis?
Look, we had very similar results in a survey we put out this week, so I guess it reinforces. We only had 8% of people rating security and the war on terror as a top 3 political issue in Australia. My read is actually that means there is no strong view either to get out or to back it. It is that ambivalence, and it's gone right down, the layer. And this is even in a time when we are, our war deaths pale into insignificance compared to America, but it's happening more and more.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is not shifting those numbers. So that's kind of interesting.
We have the Americans currently talking about withdrawing from Afghanistan by 2014. How do you see this happening, the debate happening in America at the moment? Are Americans getting to a point where they have just decided that the war will end in 2014, or do they see it lasting longer and forever in a sense in the way that you're getting these results in the survey?
Yeah, I think 2 things to separate. Will the United States still be in Afghanistan after 2014? And I think everybody knows the answer to that is yes, in some capacity. Does that mean that the global war on terror, the war in Afghanistan, continues? I think that we don't know for sure, but there are still American troops, everywhere where we've fought wars. And so it's unlikely that we entirely leave Afghanistan, even though 2014 seems to be this target that certainly everyone in Washington is talking about.
Peter, you got a comment there?
No, I'll pass to Tommy if he's got something.
Well, I was just interested to know, was the research time frame with Osama's death, was that factored in? And also, did you see any sort of generational thing where those who were between 18 and 35 who are, spent a lot of their life in the post-September 11 environment, and any distinction between men and women?
Yeah, so we fielded this survey after the death of Osama bin Laden, so just let a couple days pass, let things settle, and then went into the field. And young people definitely show some differences, and especially in terms of thinking that the events of September 11th are historical, the most important historical event of the last half century. Young people much more likely to say that than older people.
This conference you're at today, what were people talking about in terms of where we're going to be 10 years from now?
It was an interesting discussion about the 2021 conference that the U.S. Study Center will convene, and what will we be talking about. Some interesting possibilities thrown out by the panel. One was biological terrorism, and people thought that this was a really important, much more important than conventional weaponry. And the second thing was environment, climate, and that could really have an effect on food supplies and water, and that there could be a real population problem there that would lead to a panic.
Okay, we've got to move on. One last item. Finally tonight, the days of free news on the internet coming to an end. News Limited has announced it will start charging for online content from October. The Australian's website will be the first to introduce a subscription model with a mix of free and subscriber-only material. It'll cost from $2.95 a week for access to the website, sounds like an ad, iPad and other tablet devices. Well, Tommy, what do you think about this paywall versus free market going on in Australia? How is it travelling with Fairfax and the Oz?
Yeah, so I think the price point's about right for $2, whatever, almost $3. But there is a bit of a distinction here between what Fairfax are doing and what the Oz are doing. The Fairfax, the SMH website, you can at midnight, you can get their whole paper online, every single article. The Australian's website is very archaic. You can't get much of what's in a hard copy online. The SMH have just released a free app, which is one of the best news apps I've ever seen. And now the Oz are now moving to a paid service, which is a very distinct course of direction for those two outlets. But news consumption is moving online. More and more people consume their news online, and even through social media. So how Fairfax News Limited and the global sort of media empires deal with this is really going to shape the media landscape over the next couple of years, even for the ABC.
Peter, what are your observations about this?
Firstly, good on News Limited for trying it, because I think the future of journalism demands a business model. It's, the ABC aside, it's not a public service. What I think is going to be fascinating with the Australian is that I think it's fair to say the Australian has been niching its politics towards one side.
What do you mean?
You know, and in a way, if you look, it's almost a Fox News model on newspapers in that it's quite partisan and quite strongly running one side of politics. So the question for me is the Australian big enough a marketplace for an organisation like the Oz to be running to one side of politics, or will market forces force it to actually open up its editorial policy a little bit? And if it does that, it could actually be a force of good.
Well, very briefly...
You cited Fox. Fox has seen astronomical growth in the last sort of 5 years.
Niching, but that's because it's got that big population base.
Yeah, I'd never accuse another outlet of niching to one side or the other as well, but...
Tommy, very briefly, we're running out of time.
Sure.
What are the lessons for the ABC in what's happening with news and with Fairfax?
I think you can provide a dynamic online service for a price, as long as the price is right and there is enough good content behind that price. And there's no reason why the ABC couldn't offer a service like that and invest the money back in to services they provide.
As soon as we start charging people for content, governments say, "Oh, we can cut your budgets."
I'll pay for Fran.
That's exactly the equation they do in their minds.
I would just tell anybody on this debate, have a look online for Annabelle Crabb's lecture in 2009. Excellent analysis of where online content is moving and where we'll have to pay.
OK, we've got to wrap it up there. Thanks very much for everyone coming in tonight. That's all for The Drum. Thanks to our guests, Lynn Vavreck, and the panel, Fran Kelly, Fran, Peter Lewis and Tommy Tudhope. You can check out the website at abc.net.au/The Drum. We'll see you again tomorrow night.